Okay, there are two main problems that we need to address for Bakes on Mesh in order for Bakes on Mesh to be fully adopted by the mesh body designers. They have not fully adopted Bakes on Mesh. We still have onion skinned avatars that are cut up into hundreds of pieces. And so in order to get it so that they don't have to do that anymore, there are two problems that need to be addressed. One is one that we've known about for a while, which is Bakes on Mesh does not apply normal maps or specular maps. And I have a solution for that, and I'll show you how it can actually work. The other one is HUDs. Customers demand HUDs so that they just, in order to hide different parts of the avatar mesh body, their custom third party like Slink or Beleza, they demand a HUD that they can just click on the different parts in the HUD to hide different parts of the body. And so in order to do that right now, they have to cut their avatar up into hundreds of pieces, which just adds thousands of vertices because it's cut up into such small individual pieces that can be hidden through a script. And so it just adds so much to the complexity and the lag of the avatar. So that's, and solving one actually almost, it just takes a little bit more to solve the other. So, okay, so there's four things that Linden Lab would need to do. Okay, one, remove the restriction on normal map and specular maps so that the placeholder texture doesn't show up when you're using the baking channels. And I'll demonstrate that in a minute so you know exactly what I'm talking about. The second one is that new baking channels would have to be added, specular baking channels and normal baking channels, but they're not actually going to be baking. I'm not talking about adding the ability to add normal maps and specular maps to the Linden Lab default avatar. No, those would actually be diffuse channels, baking channels. They'd actually be for the diffuse channel, and I'll show you how it would work. The second one is we would need to update skins and universal wearables so that they have these new channels. And then finally, in order to make the HUD to work, Linden Lab Viewer would have to bring in some of the RLV code, and just like Firestorm has. And that's so that the HUDs would actually be workable and doable, and they could use system wearable alphas instead of cutting up their avatar into hundreds of pieces. So, okay, so how are we going to make this work? Okay, so here is the mesh body, and this is actually two separate pieces. There's the upper body, and then there's the lower body. There's no feet in this mesh, and there's no hands on this mesh. And the head is just the Linden Lab default head. It's not a custom mesh head. Okay, so how does it work? Well, if I select a face and I select this face, you can actually see the nice thing. Linden Lab, you should add this little thing to the Linden Lab edit window. See, this tells you what face it is when you select it. This is face number 2, which means there's two other faces, and these faces are hidden inside the avatar. There's face 0 and there's face 1. Okay, they're actually hidden. Now, yes, I could have done it with 2 triangles instead of 4 triangles, but just to make things easier to understand so that you could actually see. And and these are diffuse textures. These two are diffuse textures. They're not normal or specular. They're just the diffuse textures. Now, I wrote a very, very simple script that takes this diffuse texture and applies it from to the normal channel, or to the normal of face 2. So I'll show you that script right now. It's a super, super simple little tiny script. And all it's doing is it's setting the primitive parameters. It's setting the normal parameter here. It's setting it to face 2, and it's getting the texture, the diffuse texture, from face 0. And then the specular map, it's pretty much the same. It's setting the specular map for face 2, and it's getting the texture from the diffuse texture off of face 1. So it's as you can see, it's a super simple little script. You can't even copyright it. It's so short, I'm sure. So it's just this little simple little script that would be inside the mesh body. And I'll show you that it actually works. So I'm going to kind of come out here, and I'm going to click the body and watch as it applies those things. Boom. It applied the normal map, and it applied the specular map to face 2. So if I go to face 2 and I select face 2 and I go to texture, you can see there's the normal map and there's the specular map. It has been applied. Okay, so how does this work with Bakes on Mesh though? And we get back to the first thing here where I'm talking about this placeholder. I'm going to demonstrate. So the lower body here, if I zoom in to here, you can see there's a hidden face, and that's face 0, and that's face 1, but that these faces, these are not, this here's face 2, that there's no normal map, no specular map that are applied. So that if I come into here, that these faces here are set to baking channels. And this one is set to baked hair, and this one is set to baked auxiliary 1. Now I say we need new auxiliaries because I think what we should do is we should have head, baked head normal, baked head specular, baked upper normal, baked upper specular, baked lower normal, baked lower specular, so that the mesh body designers can simply set these hidden faces to the correct baking channel, and it will always get, because then no matter what people wear, if it's a system alpha to hide different parts of the body, it'll be applied to the appropriate thing here, and then my script would then apply it to the body. And just like this is set to bake to the lower. So what happens? Let me select that. What happens when we run this script? Because it has the same script that the other one had. And so what happens when I click this one? Boom. This is that placeholder texture that I was telling you about. There's the baked hair. And if you look, you can see it does this. This is not a transparent texture, this is actually, the darkness is from the normal of that texture being used as a normal map, and you can see the shine here. That's being used as a specular. So all we have to do is, or I should say, all Linden Lab has to do is go into these normal and specular maps and turn it off, because you see it actually goes and gets the correct texture, and it would have applied it correctly just like the upper body had it not did this placeholder texture. So if we just do those two things, or those few things, all of a sudden Bakes on Mesh works with the specularity map and the normal map, and we'll apply it. Now, to get the HUD to work, we need to, like I said, bring over the RLV code. Oh, and let me show you just real quick. Let's see, like this is the skin I was wearing. So in the edit window for skin, you would have to have 6 more slots, for the textures. So there would be upper or head, normal head, head baked, normal head baked, specular, and vice versa, and so on for the upper body and lower body. And then for the system clothing universal, you'd have to add those slots as well. So with the RLV, and I'll show you the RLV code, it's really super simple. So if we go to the RLV code, and when I first clicked on the avatar body, I didn't have this code running. So I'll turn it on. See, all it says is when you touch it, the avatar, when you click on the avatar, it goes into this folder and wears everything in that folder. Now, I don't know that much about RLV. I was just trying to do it as down and dirty easy to understand as possible. There may be other code for RLV that allows you to actually specify which folder, and in that folder, which item. I don't know if that's possible with RLV or not, but that might, and that would be still very simple code. And so in order to make the HUD work, the mesh body designers would have to recreate their individual mesh items. They would have one item for the upper body, and then to recreate it so that they're using the same alphas that they used to always wear, they would just convert them over to a system alpha. And yes, there would be 100 system alphas in there, but the script, when they clicked on it in the code, in the viewer, would just tell it to go in and wear this particular alpha to hide the different parts of the alpha. And mesh clothing designers could also have a little script in their mesh clothing that tells them to go into those folders, because those folders would be known, and say it to wear whichever alphas that would normally be that would then automatically be worn. You would get rid of appliers, and you would make it easier for the customers, for the user, the end user, just to, they just wear the shirt or the dress, and it automatically goes in and wears the appropriate alphas. Okay, so now if we're going to, I want to show you, now that I've turned on the RLV code, it's running, I'm going to click on it. And boom, there's the alpha. It's now wearing this. So that simple script could be turned into a HUD. It could be added to clothing so that they wear the appropriate alpha here. Yes, it'd be a bit of work for the mesh clothing, not for the mesh clothing design. It'd be a bit of work for the mesh body designers to set up all these, but once they're set up, they're done. And then they can use those same alphas on other mesh bodies that they make, and the alphas are already there and all set up. So in the long run, it's a lot less work for the mesh body designer once they get set up. So awesome. So that's how the whole system would work. And awesome. So I hope Linen Lab decides to take up this and revisit Bakes on Mesh and get the HUDs to work and the materials to work. Awesome.